Once again, I am on my lovely Washington Beach, and I'm here to talk to you today, not necessarily about psychedelics. In today's video, I want to talk about consciousness. I want to talk about some mysteries that I would love to figure out about what is going on here. What is up with this feeling of inner experience that we have? This feeling that something is going on. Why aren't we just machines that don't feel anything whatsoever? So I want to dive into some of the mysteries, at least as I see them, of consciousness itself. So I hope you'll come along with me for the journey, and maybe if you figured some of these things out by chance, please let me know in the comments below, because these are things that sort of torture me anytime I smoke marijuana. So let's get into it. I think one interesting thing to note is that when we think about which species may have this feeling of inner experience or consciousness, it may be helpful to think about it in a few different ways. There seem to be species that we are almost certain have an experience, say squirrels, small rodents, and things like that. I can certainly imagine that there is a certain character to the experience of being one of these things. And then there are things like us, the great apes, that seem to sometimes know that they are having an experience. And that seems to be that layer, almost with another conscious layer added on top of it. And then there may be some living organisms that we don't attribute any sense of experience to whatsoever. So that may be microscopic organisms like bacteria, for example. And upon investigation, we find that most of these are based on, a good amount of rationality, but mostly our intuition. They're mostly based on what we understand consciousness to be made of, what we understand the substrate to be in man, what we understand it to be in our nearby relatives, and then really just extrapolating from there. But we truly have no idea when the universe woke up, when the first experience was. So this brings me to a mystery of consciousness that I would love to know. What was the first thing to ever have an experience? And what was that experience like? Was it some type of primordial organism in some type of an ocean on Earth or elsewhere? Was it a deity? Was it some type of omniscient being that woke up? When and why did the universe come to know itself rather than simply being blind mechanism? Some scientists may say that it appears that consciousness emerged as an ability for organisms to model complex environments that also included themselves in it. And I find that argument very compelling. I think that's most likely all of it. And yet there is this, what seems at least on the surface to be an irreducible mystery to consciousness that keeps us guessing. It seems as though we're not simply adaptive mechanism. If consciousness is merely an adaptive mechanism, it doesn't feel like it. And so when that first species, or in your view, being maybe, felt something, why did that occur? Was it because it was evolutionarily adaptive? Was it because the physical hardware had arranged itself at a complexity that it could sustain consciousness? Was consciousness there from the beginning and then was allowed to filter through this physical form? I just want to know what that state was like when consciousness either began or perhaps maybe in your view was always here. And things can get even more spooky if we start to consider the multiverse and things like that. Maybe it wasn't even something in this eon that woke up first. Maybe it was something 35 Big Bangs ago and a few universes over that first felt something. Another mystery to consciousness that just gets me so excited is, what are all the possible forms that consciousness can take? I mean, certainly there's every individual human on this planet that seems to be having a conscious experience, and then there are many of us that would attribute conscious experience to all of our mammal relatives, and so on down the food chain. So we know that there are a variety of forms on Earth that can be a unique experience for the universe to live through. So what's the limit to this? Can gas clouds be conscious? Can consciousness exist at microscopic levels? For example, one interesting question is a nervous system required to have an experience? It seems that everything that we know in this life that we attribute experience or inner life to has a nervous system. And people even orient their ethical systems about what and what they won't kill based around the nervous system capacity of an organism. So this seems to be a fundamental assumption in our culture that the more complex the nervous system, the more the capacity for experience, so to say. What if we were to find that really the nervous system is just one of many, many configurations of atoms that give rise to consciousness? This is what anybody who believes that artificial AI that is sentient is possible believes in. They believe that Atoms, when arranged in a particular pattern, will give rise to consciousness no matter the substrate. One of the more frequent things that you will hear from those who are scientifically inclined if you start to ask them about what they believe the origins of consciousness on this planet to be is that it was highly adaptive. It was highly adaptive for a being to have a feeling of experience. And I fully agree with that. But it seems sometimes that people aren't willing to take this assumption as far as it may go. If consciousness is as adaptive as we have seen it be in humans, if we have seen consciousness more or less bring humans from the bottom of the food chain to top predators on this planet, is it all that unreasonable to suppose that there are many conscious networks on this planet that have evolved previously, and that their aims or their motives may not be completely known to us? This planet has existed for hundreds of millions and actually billions of years before anything that even resembled the ancestor of a human existed. And yet, if consciousness is as adaptive as we believe it to be, and if our understanding of the neuronal basis of consciousness is not quite as accurate as we think it is it not highly possible that consciousness could have emerged several times, many times actually, on this planet before, in many different types of species? And of course, something being adaptive does not mean that this took place in nature to happen simply because it's adaptive. But it's a very interesting thought experiment to run. Consciousness, if you put it in just about any organism, would probably be an adaptive benefit. Okay, now moving on here. Another mystery to consciousness that I would love to know the answer to is, are we alone? Is the universe either saturated with consciousness, or is consciousness very rare in this universe? I was thinking the other day, how funny would it be if Earth was actually relatively rare in the universe, in the sense that everybody else knew one or two neighbors, or maybe even hundreds of neighbors, but we don't know a single extraterrestrial neighbor. So we've formed this entirely unique culture based around, what if when we finally meet the aliens, and everybody else meets the aliens really early on in their stage, and they're like, oh, you haven't met the aliens yet? So my thinking goes both ways with this, because I'm sometimes able to do the thought experiment where every single particle is conscious, and then I'm also able to do the thought experiment that absolutely no sentient life exists outside of this planet due to all of the limiting factors. And both of them fascinate me. If the universe is saturated with consciousness via some type of panpsychism reality where consciousness is actually a fundamental element to this universe that imbues all things, or all things actually are a projection of consciousness, well, now that's fascinating, is it not? In our dreams, at least, we seem to be able to create this reality. In your dreams every night, it seems that you're able to create a projection that successfully fools you that you are in a physical reality that you need to care about. And it seems that if consciousness is capable of playing this type of tricks on itself, how far does it go? So I'm equally open to any type of panpsychist reality, or the type of reality that the universe seems to be mostly dead. Maybe there was some type of intergalactic war that took place, a few eons ago that we missed the party for. I'm sure the American South would have loved to take part in that if they could. Another question: does consciousness require matter in every case? Does it always require a physical substrate? Could it be the case that consciousness exists in many forms outside of a material form, but a material form allows it to have certain qualities that it cannot have otherwise? For example, I can imagine that having a brain and having an integrated spinal cord and all of the nerves that we have allows a conducive human being to be created with its own unique experiences, memories, and perspective. But could it be the case that consciousness is something that, not the sense of a soul, but could it be the case that consciousness is a phenomena, and that matter allows consciousness to make itself apparent, to show itself in ways that it never would have before? I can envision a type of reality where consciousness can exist in many non-physical forms, and matter simply gives it certain properties. For example, maybe matter is simply the storage device for consciousness. Maybe there's a type of unbounded experiential phenomena that takes place outside of this form that we understand, but maybe it is nothing like what we know because it does not have the sensory inputs that we know. So there may be something that it is like to be an unbounded physical form that still has experience that we could just possibly never understand. And this is something I would never claim to know exists or to even believe exists, because we just don't know. But it's something we should be open-minded to, because it's a feeling we all have, this feeling that we are deeper, that we are something divine, you may say, that we are a spark of the universe reflecting back on itself. I think I'm gonna bring an end to my talk there. The tide is sneaking up on me, and consciousness can be discussed endlessly, but I want to thank you for listening to this for however long it ends up being on YouTube. I appreciate all of you so much for watching this channel. It has really fundamentally changed my life to be able to create these videos. And I'm going to zoom home and read the Patreon list. I have recruited a slave to read the Stone of Legends, as it has now become so heavy that it actually cannot be formally contained. I will read Alfredo Garbanzo, Adam Sornat, Alex Miser, Alpha Disconnect, Anti-Miko Machinen, Ashkore Dracson, Ben, Billy Gillis, Blue Dog Music, Caleb Talaxon, Cameron Plourde, Chicks, Choosey, Chris Chapin, Chris Liver, Connor Nelson, The Happy Hour Show, DeAndre Jamal, Daniel Shiner, Danny Cameron, Dendare Lotus, Devin Hall, Dylan Brown, Eric Sear, Fishy, Jedimanos, Helvetia, Irate Llama, Jack Donahue, Pardon the Birds, Jake Hall, Jeremy Schroeder, Jeremy Sorrell, Josh Farrell, the slave is nodding his head, he likes the music, Justin Boudreau, Karenda, Kelvin, King Ragnar, Lassie, Leron, Chandy, Lithium Blodwyn, Louis Le Louis, Luck, Lynn Norton, Mayor, Mia Valentine, Miguel Navarro, Mike King, Mohiyidine Cheikh, Morty, Night Slayer Bot, Ohram Mcleod, Oven Want Kenobi, Pineapple Dan, Professor, can't say that one on YouTube, Rainbow, Rakaya Benoit, Robbie, Royan, Ryan Allen, Sarah Chapagain, Sebastian Reisinger, Secular Shaman, Sierra Butler, Sir Pugsley, Serena Sedeguy, Sponebeer, Steven, Surfs Up Tom, Tatum Scott, The Gaming Guy, 3-Pounder, Toxic Player, Tyler, Voyager, Zachary Daniel, Zebediah, Connor McGregor, Cub, Fenn, Christopher Boyce Jr., James Campbell, Hueya, Shooting Star, Phoebe, Zach Bean, Yesh Reuven, Corey Sloan, Josh Dangwin, Raphael Gord, Light Samuel, and Landon Lazaro. Thank you all so much. You are the backbone of this channel.